Today I'm going to discuss the importance of a cool down after your training. I'm going to try to give you some context to convince you that this actually does matter and we're not just cooling down just to cool down or because we've heard it's good for us. Let's try to wrap our heads around why it's good for us. And then I'm going to give you some tips to improve the quality of your cool down. So I think many of us, athletes, coaches, clinicians, understand the importance of a warm-up. Now we might debate what exactly is happening during a warm-up. I do recall a social media wave where all of a sudden people decided it wasn't important. Let the young individuals or those just being playful for social media continue that debate. Let's just say many of us understand the importance of a warm-up that actually train. So we're attuned to that. So you come into the gym and maybe you're doing some cardiovascular exercises, maybe you're combining that with some mobility work, maybe some mental exercises, some practice strategies, things like that. We're very good at ramping up the system to get ready for a big training stimulus where we need a lot of attention, we have a lot of demand on the body. I think most people I work with are attuned to that, are pretty good at that for the most part. The part that gets missed is the cool down. And the reason this matters, I'm going to bring up heart rate variability here because I think this is a useful tool to sort of illustrate its importance. Heart rate variability is considered by many to be a good indicator for how flexible someone's nervous and cardiovascular systems are at regulating homeostasis. So what I'm saying is your ability to adapt to the day-to-day demands. Your system requires flexibility to do this. It needs to be able to do things that are really, really hard with a lot of stimulus. Maybe heart rate, blood pressure go up, so there's some sort of physical demand there, or maybe there's a high cognitive demand and our attention's required. Then we have periods where we need to relax and digest and rest, and attention can go down, heart rate, blood pressure go down. So there are varying degrees of stimulus throughout the day, and our flexibility to adapt to those stimuli are really important. Heart rate variability may be an indicator of how good we are at that. So while we're very good at ramping up the sympathetic input for our warm-up, we should also consider if we want that flexibility of the system to be optimal, we need to be able to cool that back down, to bring down that sympathetic tone and increase that parasympathetic tone. So one method for doing this is a breathing exercise. Specifically, I'll give you some parameters here. We're looking for about 6 breaths per minute. Now, this is going to vary somewhat from person to person, but 6 breaths per minute has been studied, and it's a pretty good average for helping people sort of maximize their heart rate variability or maximize the flexibility of their system to adapt. So how does our system control parasympathetic tone or parasympathetic input to the system? Here's how. Through baroreception. Okay, this is a reflex that occurs when little pressure sensing neurons that live inside the aortic arch of the heart and the internal carotid arteries detect blood pressure changes. So in this case, they would detect an increase in blood pressure from our workout, and we're trying to bring that back down. So if those little pressure sensing neurons detect that increase in blood pressure, they're going to send a signal through the glossopharyngeal nerve, which is the 9th cranial nerve, and it's going to go to the brainstem, specifically the medulla. From the brainstem, another signal is going to go out that says, hey, we need to course correct this blood pressure and bring it back down. That signal is going to go through the vagus nerve into what's called the sinoatrial node of the heart. This is kind of like the heart's pacemaker. So, quick recap. Increases in blood pressure sensed by these little pressure sensing neurons that live inside the heart and the artery, internal carotid artery. They detect that increase in pressure, send a signal to the brainstem through the 9th cranial nerve, glossopharyngeal nerve. There's a correction in the brainstem through the signal via the vagus nerve that goes out to the heart that's going to bring the blood pressure back down. If you've ever wondered why, it's well known that as you inhale, you see an increase in heart rate and a decrease in blood pressure. And when you exhale, the opposite occurs. This is one of the reported mechanisms as to why that happens, why that variability is present. So what we're doing here is we are trying to train the baroreceptor reflex, and yes, by the way, this is trainable. I know I said reflex. There is some very cool neuroscience that tells us that this is a neuroplastic change that can occur. In other words, we can actually affect the brain's ability to better control this reflex. So this is our way of practicing it. And there are some connections from that brainstem area I talked about, the medulla. there are some connections between that brainstem, that breathing center, and other areas of the brain that control things like executive function and emotional regulation. This is why you see correlations between heart rate variability and physical and emotional health. So this is a very, very important thing to train, and the good news is, although it is a reflex, there's some data suggesting that it is trainable. So why not do this during your cool down? So if you're already going through an active cool down process of walking, maybe it's 5 to 10 minutes, an easy suggestion and an easy fit is during that last 5 to 10 minutes. I think 5 is really a kind of a minimum, not because that's been well studied, but because many people I work with find that if they don't take at least a few minutes to do these breathing exercises, they don't seem to actually have much of an impact on the system. They don't seem to notice anything. So if you're going through a 10-minute cool down period, you can use all 10 minutes, but at the bare minimum, I would suggest at least 5, where you're walking at a rate where you can actually do some slow breath work. And the protocol I would suggest that you could try, if we're looking at 6 breaths per minute, would be 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Now that's not the only thing that's been proposed. There's been 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out proposed. You can try that to see if that works better for you. But I like the longer exhale because there is some data to suggest exhaling for longer than inhaling can help decrease the blood pressure and bring us a higher parasympathetic tone faster, maybe. So try that breathing exercise. Your goal again is to calm the system back down, just like you ramped it up for your workout. This is a really good way to help improve the flexibility of that system. So that I think is a good intention for your cool down. So the last 5 or 10 minutes of your active walk, if that's what you're using, try the slow breathing exercises. Make sure you bring down the walking pace to where you can actually accomplish this. If you're trying to walk too fast, you're gonna find there's a mismatch there. It's largely going to be based on fitness level as well. So walk at a very comfortable pace that you can actually do 6 breaths per minute, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Try that over the course of the next week and see if you don't notice a difference. Thanks.